Hey everyone, Nathan here, Absurd Being. Alright, Phenomenology of Perception. We're in part 2, the perceived world, and this is the third section of 4 in part 2. And this section that we're going to be looking at today, and for probably the next 2 videos as well, is the thing in the natural world. And basically the idea, the way that we're going to start here is by looking at perceptual constants. And the idea, or the Merleau-Ponty's, the question that's driving Merleau-Ponty through this first part is explaining these perceptual constants and how it is that we perceive constancies when we're looking at things and when we're apprehending things. So, for example, the way that size for us, when we perceive someone, whether they're far away or close to us, we perceive their size as being the same. We don't perceive, someone who's close to us as being like a giant and someone who's far away as being tiny. We understand, or we apprehend them with a constancy. There's a constancy underlying that perception. And that's what Merleau-Ponty's going to investigate in this part. So let's get into the first section, which is size and form. Right, so the first thing that Merleau-Ponty says here is he takes the psychologist's perspective, which I think is the empiricist one. And what he says is that size for the psychologist is, or the true size of an object is the object at arm's length. So something that far away from us, facing us directly, so not at an angle, so that we can see it nice and clearly. And that's what its true size is when it's there. And the orientation, the way it's oriented towards us, so that it's nice and square. That's its true form, the form that we see there. Anything else we see, if we see it from an angle, that's it's false or incorrect, or it's not the true form. If we see it on an angle, we see the perspective is out, right? And that's like an illusion. Same thing if we see it far away. That's the apparent size, the way it looks, is not its real size. Its real size is the way it is when it's arm's length away from us. And the problem with this is that this is basically an arbitrary definition of the real, right? It doesn't, it's just like, well, okay, about here, it looks pretty good. If it's too close, it seems too big, and but if it's far away, it seems too small. So let's put it in the middle. That's its true size. And the other problem with this is that it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't explain our perception of size. It doesn't explain why we understand or perceive size as constant, whether the object is near or far away. Then he looks at intellectualism, which basically avoids the question. It avoids this problem by saying that size and form aren't even in the perceptions. So when we perceive something, we're not actually perceiving the thing's real size or the thing's real form. The size and form that we get in these appearances, in these perceptions, are just relational. There is no true size here. There is no true form. All we get is the thing at this distance from us. That's how it appears, but that's not real. The real, the object itself, the real size or the real form, is an ideal concept for the intellectualist, and therefore it's that concept that contains all of these different perspectives. All of these different perspectives come out of that original ideal size or form as kind of related to it. So once we understand that ideal form or size, then we can when we see the real, the actual perception, when we actually perceive the thing, we can relate that back to the ideal concept that we have. And it's in that sense that we come to understand our perceptions according to the intellectualist. This is that, if you remember Leibniz's house, way back at the beginning of this series, we talked about this, in the way that for Leibniz, the real house isn't the one that we see, it's the geometrical floor plan, which includes all of the possible perspectives. So all the possible perspectives can be derived from it. That's what the real house is for Leibniz. Same thing here. And what we have here then is that we're not experiencing the perspective. We're not experiencing our perception anymore under this account. We're rather trying to understand it. We're intellectualizing it. The perception itself is passed over. The perception itself is ignored. There's something it's pointing towards. So now we have that sign and signification, but this time they're not the same thing. The sign is the perspective, the perception. The thing, the signification, the thing it's pointing to is something different, an ideal, intellectualized, abstracted concept. So that's intellectualism. And Merleau-Ponty, however, he will start this investigation from the phenomenon, which means that we get the thing embedded in the world already. We get the thing as it appears to us, as we perceive it. So we're not glossing over it, we're not adding anything to it or taking anything away from it. We're just taking our perception and taking it seriously. That's the way I think of phenomenology. It takes perception, it takes our perceptions seriously, and it looks to understand them rather than replacing them with an abstraction that we can then think about, or reducing everything to sensory inputs and kind of cause, and the whole cause effect story that empiricism leads to. Okay, so we're going to start from the phenomenon. So where are we going with this? For science, the object in the distance is the same as the object up close. So there's no difference between the two, right? Because we're dealing with kind of an idealized concept. We're not dealing with the actual thing. And the relation between the thing up close and the thing far away is calculated. We can measure the distance, the apparent size, and we can figure it all out. And so this is the way that the scientist approaches this. So the actual perception is replaced by a calculation. There's a calculation going on here. It's that far away. It appears to be that big. So if it was closer, it would appear to be this big. And we can, we're kind of working backwards, and we get back to that, to Leibniz's true house through that kind of process. So for Merleau-Ponty, the object in the distance, and this is a nice comparison between the scientific approach and Merleau-Ponty's approach, which fleshes out how Merleau-Ponty's approaching this. Lots of approaches in there. For Merleau-Ponty, the object in the distance is the object up close as well, but it's the object up close seen at a distance. And so that's the crucial difference here. We're not taking what our perceptual givens and inferring something else, letting it point us to some other theoretical or abstract concept. We're just taking the thing in the distance is the thing up close seen at a distance. So it's the same thing, but seen far away. It seems so obvious, it's so simple to say, but it captures that difference, I think, between the scientific approach, which like I said, leads but via a calculation back to some other object, not the object that's actually out there, leads us to this different concept. And so it retains the perception, and that's really what I wanted to say here. It keeps it treats our perception seriously. It doesn't say, the object at a distance looks like that, but what it really is this. Merleau-Ponty is saying, no, the object at a distance is this thing seen at a distance. So we're not pointing to any other reality. The sign is the signification. So if the object in the distance is the object up close seen at a distance, what is the object up close? That's probably a good next question. And here Merleau-Ponty talks about a privileged perception. And so this is interesting. It's not an indifference or different from the way we talked about at the beginning, the empiricist, with the thing being the way it is at arm's length from us, the real size being the size at arm's length. Merleau-Ponty's privileged perception isn't arbitrary, nor is it a rule. So it's neither of those things. It's not fixed in any way. Rather, he describes it as the optimal distance. And the optimal distance from which the object asks to be seen, from which the object invites us to, or from which the object reveals itself to us in the best, in the most detail, gives us the most detail. That's the optimal distance. That's the privileged perception. And I've written here, it's an orientation through which it presents more of itself. That's what that is. And so it's very practical. So it's for Merleau-Ponty, again, it's not arbitrary. It's not, it must be this far away, because that's the way that our gaze works. We can focus clearly when blah blah blah. Nor is it a rule. It's not something we can arbitrarily apply in every case. It's the optimal distance. So it's really every object will be different. The optimal distance will be different, and it will be different in different ways depending on what we're looking for, depending on what we're currently engaged in, the project that we're currently undertaking. So all of these things will come into play to determine the optimal distance, this privileged perception. And there's something which is quite interesting that comes from this as well, is the way that Merleau-Ponty measures distance and orientation. So the measure of distance and orientation is different for Merleau-Ponty as opposed to the scientist. So distance isn't a size that increases or decreases. It's not quantifiable in that. It's not quantifiable. Let me just say that. Rather, he says it's a tension that oscillates around a norm. And that's a nice expression, which means that it refers to our grasp of the object. That's how Merleau-Ponty's defining or understanding distance. It's not this quantifiable, measurable size that increases when the object moves further away, decreases when the object comes closer. It's a tension that oscillates around a norm. The norm is that privileged perception, and the further away an object is, it's not, we can't get the ruler out and measure it. That's not an accurate account of distance from a phenomenological perspective. The distance, rather, is we measure the distance by the loss of our grasp of the object. As it moves further away, we no longer see it in such detail. We lose aspects of it. Things become blurry. Our hold fades, and that's what measures distance. As it comes closer, it comes closer to that sweet spot, that privileged perception, and then we see the object in its optimal form or size. But as it gets too close as well, then suddenly that our grasp of the object, our hold over it, drops again. It becomes too close again. Things get blurry. We don't see the whole thing. And so that's the way that Merleau-Ponty's approaching or looking to understand distance, not as a quantifiable measurement, but as our grasp of the thing. And that's really cool. I really like that. The same with the angle of the object from us, the way it's angled towards us. An oblique orientation is not an angle that we can measure and plug into a formula to give us the correct form, but it's a disequilibrium. We don't have a proper grasp of the thing. It's tilted, it's pointed away from us. We've got an incomplete hold over it. We've got an incomplete apprehension of it, and that's what the orientation of the thing is. Again, not a measurable angle, but a disequilibrium. It reflects our grasp of the object. So that's cool. That was a cool little thing. Bringing this back to, just comparing it back to the empiricist and the intellectualist account, size and form, therefore, for Merleau-Ponty, aren't true or false, nor they're not even relative. Instead, size and form modalize our hold on the world in that way that we just talked about. So that's the idea that's at the heart of this section. Now I've said explain true and false. They're not true. Size and form, as we perceive them, can never be true or false. They're just we have a better or a worse grasp of the object. We never get this. There is no one ideal true size or true form. It's when the object is at that privileged perception, when it's at that optimal distance, when it is the privileged perception, then we get, well, the optimal grasp of the thing, right? But it's not, in no sense can we say that then is the true shape or the true form or the true size. Those words just, the perception is prior to those descriptions, those normative descriptions. And a good example of this is if we think about Descartes. He always talks about the square towers in the distance. Seen from far away, they look round. And for Descartes, then, that perception of the towers as round is wrong. It's incorrect. It's an illusion. But for Merleau-Ponty, the round towers that we perceive are the towers, the square towers, seen at a distance. There's no right or wrong here. That is what the towers appear like that, and it's these square towers seen at a distance. There's no sense in which we can say that that's wrong, it's incorrect in any way. Because every time you see it from this perspective, from this angle, it's going to look like that. It doesn't admit of these categories of true or false. So perception's prior to that. And why not relative? Well, in a sense, they are relative. Size and form are relative to us, but they're relative to us as far as that optimal distance goes. But that's not what we typically mean, I think, when we use the word relative. If you think of something like moral relativism, the idea there is that any moral approach is fine. Whatever you like is, there is no best moral approach or moral outlook. And that's not what Merleau-Ponty is saying here. So his theory of perception here isn't relative because there is a preference. The preference is that optimal distance, that privileged perception. So he's not saying that anything's fine, and if you see the object from far away and it looks like that, that's okay. Let's just say the object is that. The perceptions do fit into this broader framework in which there is one privileged perception. So they're not relative. It's not true or false, nor are these things, size and form, relative. And so obviously, given that size and form are then about our hold on the thing, all of this turns on the body. So the body is central to this yet again. And that's just something which is on every page of this book. You can see the centrality of the body for Merleau-Ponty. Okay, so let's look into the second part of this section, which deals with colour. Right, starting with empiricism again. Real colour for the empiricist is the colour of the thing under normal lighting conditions. So the way we normally see it, that's what its real colour is. Problem with this, again, artificial, arbitrary. Doesn't tell us anything about colour, doesn't tell us why we perceive constants, why we have this constant sense of colour, irrespective of the lighting. You know, a white piece of paper seen in the shadows, we still perceive it as white, even though it's actually a grey. You know, it's more greyish than white. So it doesn't explain any of those. Intellectualism, the same as before, same as we saw with size and form. The real colour is this idealized colour, perhaps defined by wavelength, light of a particular wavelength, however you want to go there. It's an ideal concept, which is resolved by relating actual perceptions to a judgment. So again, very intellectualized, very abstract. And again, the problem with this, it assumes an ideal colour, doesn't explain colour at all, doesn't explain our perception of colour. So what does Merleau-Ponty have to say about this? Let me give you a quote to start off with. Real colour remains beneath the appearances just as the background continues beneath the figure. That is, not as a quality that is seen or conceived, but rather as a non-sensorial presence. Now that Merleau-Ponty starts this section with that quote. It's probably not the best place to put it though, and we'll come back to this later. We'll come back to that quote when we finish this section. So just keep that in mind. We'll return to it in a moment. So anyway, let's take a white wall. Merleau-Ponty's example is a white wall which appears grey-blue if the light source is hidden. So if we see it in the normal lighting, it seems white, but when we obscure the light source, we see the wall as this grey-blue colour. Now the change in colour, once the light source is hidden, is a structural change to the object, to the colour. And so what Merleau-Ponty is getting at with this is that colour it's not an accidental quality. It's not something that, it's not a minor feature. It's not something we can abstract out from the thing and look at on its own. Rather, when the colour changes here, we have a structural change. The whole thing changes. And so in doing this, in blocking off that light source so that the wall appears grey-blue, we no longer see the wall in its proper context. We no longer see the wall in a field surrounded by other objects, including that light source. We've taken the wall outside. We've taken the wall out of where it is, and tried to abstract it out, and then looked at it and tried to derive a true color from that. You know, it's like we're trying to we think that everything else is obscuring our picture of the color of the wall. So in order to get a clear picture, we're like taking it away from all the impurities in the scene, in the field before us, including the light source, because that's affecting the color of the wall. So we want, in order to get this, see it as it really is, but in taking it apart, taking it out from the scene, we're not seeing it as it really is. We're not seeing the wall as it really is. What it really is the wall in that field before us. That's what it really is. When it's functioning in the scene, when it's functioning as a divider between this field and that field, or as it is with the light there behind it, or in front of it, or wherever it is. So we have to get the wall abstracted out of its context. Isn't the wall at all. And that's really where we're going to go with this. So I've got a quote here. At the moment we place the screen between our eye and the spectacle, or at the moment we squint, we free the colours from the objectivity of bodily surfaces, and we reduce them to the simple condition of luminous areas. We no longer see real bodies, the wall, the piece of paper, with determinate colours and located in their place in the world. Rather, we see coloured patches that are all vaguely situated upon the same fictional plane. And that is just what I was just saying. Colours, when we abstract the thing out, when we get rid of the light source, colours are no longer colours of objects. Then we're losing the very thing we're looking for. Instead, we get these luminous areas. What colour is, and this is a deeper understanding of what colour is for Merleau-Ponty. It's not a light of a particular wavelength impacting our retina and being interpreted by our brain. It's how can I say it? Colour is a coloured object. We can't separate out the colour from the object, from the coloured object. The colour is part of that object. When you separate it out, when you take it away, you lose that colour. I mean, you get the scientific definition. Light has a particular wavelength, or light with a particular wavelength. And that's exactly not what we are getting in perception. And this approach, interestingly, this approach is the opposite of science, which specifically dispenses with these relations, specifically tries to avoid these types of the context. It tries to take everything out of context, idealizes everything. So that's interesting just to note there. Science understands then how coloured lighting distorts colours. They've worked it out. It's all calculable. It's all quantifiable. But then in doing this, and that's great, depending on what you're after. If you're after that, if you want to mix certain colours and get a different colour, or you want to, you have some specific goal in mind, but it misses the perception. It doesn't tell us anything about human lived perception, and that's what we're after here. So, perception, what is the perception of colour in the object, and how does it remain constant? That was our driving question in this section. We've touched on a couple of ideas, that the thing has to be in a context, and that's where the thing's colour is revealed, and also that colour isn't or can't be abstracted from the object itself. Colour is a coloured object. But now Merleau-Ponty wants to drill in on this idea with three questions. And the first is, what is lighting? So Merleau-Ponty talks about this with the example of a torch. If you shine a torch on a wall, all you get are pools of dazzling brightness. That's the quote. You just get pools of dazzling brightness. You don't get any grasp of whatever it is you're trying to illuminate, because the focus of the torch is so narrow, right? So all you get are these isolated moments of brightness. The torchlight doesn't make anything appear. That's what Merleau-Ponty's getting at here. And this gives us a deeper insight into the function of lighting. And I'll read a quote for you. Lighting and reflection only play their role if they fade into the background as discrete intermediaries, and if they direct our gaze rather than arresting it. So that is an interesting thing to say, an interesting point to make. Lighting only works. Well, the function of lighting is to make things appear, for a start. And they only do that when and lighting only does that when it fades into the background. If it's so prominent, like the torchlight, so bright, so focused, it doesn't make anything appear. It's just like this bright light, dazzling brightness. That's all it is. That's what appears, the dazzling brightness, not the thing it's trying to illuminate. And this, I just want to keep talking about that quote a bit. So lighting then is not color, nor really is it even light as we normally think about it. Rather, it's this neutral background. And Merleau-Ponty he doesn't talk about this. He talks about some colored light. But if you think about fluorescent light, which appears white at first, if you look at it, if you're coming from, say, a room lit by a kind of an orangey, yellowy, those older bulbs, and into a room lit by a fluorescent light, it seems really white. Everything seems white. But if you stay in the room, eventually that sense fades. You no longer see the whiteness of the fluorescent bulb. The light from the fluorescent bulb becomes lighting. That is to say, it dissolves into the background. It's no longer what you focus on. You focus on the things that it makes appear for you. And that's what I mean when I say it becomes lighting rather than the white light that's shining on you. So lighting is not an object. It's not an object. It's not a figure on a background. It's what we take up. It's the way that we approach the things that it reveals. It's the way that we get to them. And in this sense, it's a little bit like, well, actually it's identical to that filmmaking analogy I gave you a while back, in which we were talking about the way that perception hides from itself necessarily. If you're aware of perception, if you're focusing on perception itself, you're not focusing, or you're unable to focus on the scene, the thing that you're trying to perceive. Same here. If the light is so dominant, you can't see the thing that you're trying to see. The light kind of washes it out. So that's the first question. What is lighting? And it's this background discrete intermediary. I like that directs our gaze. Okay, cool. The second question is, what is the organization of the field? And so this is getting us back to the idea of that context. And Merleau-Ponty has another example. Light, if you shine a light on a piece of paper, what we get then is this kind of a cone shape appears with the paper as the base of the cone. There's nothing else around, all you're doing is shining a light down onto this piece of paper. The paper's the base, and it appears like there's this cone of light. That's all. And it seems like it's a solid thing too. But if you introduce a piece of paper into the beam, suddenly it breaks that scene apart, and the light becomes lighting. Now it's lighting up this piece of paper. Now it's revealing this piece of paper. So it changes. And that's the analogy is to a real world scene where a focus on one thing, which is abstraction, loses the cohesion of the whole. We no longer get everything in context. And the analogy is to the solid cone of light, which doesn't reveal the thing as what it is. It becomes the thing that we focus on. And in that case, the light acts like a spotlight, so it's not doing the role of lighting, and which we've talked about. But here now the focus is on the thing in a scene, in a field before us, in context. So true colour only appears when the true object appears, and that's to say, under lighting, in a scene, in a background. There's if you remember the way that we talked about synesthesia a few videos back, with the blue, the way that this different sensory modalities kind of overlap, we have the same idea here. Merleau-Ponty says that the blue of the rug wouldn't be the same blue if it weren't woolly. It's a woolly blue. That's what it is. That's what this blue of the rug is. It's this woolly, fuzzy blue. And if you take that away, abstract out from that, and get, say, the blue itself, you've lost the color that you were after. You've got a different color. You've got an abstracted, intellectualized, scientific description rather than a perceptual one. And he has another example here too, which I'll give to you, that of looking at a painting. And if you look too close, the light dominates the whole scene, and the color then is just smears of paint on a canvas. But if you step back, the light fades into the background. It does the job of lighting. The painting becomes the figure, and then the colors in the painting stand out as what they really are. They stand out as the color of the jacket that person's wearing, or the color of that fruit over there. So that's this idea that things only appear for us in a scene carries into this idea of color. Color only appears for us on objects in a scene. So the organization of the field, that's what that was about. The final question is, in what sense is the color of the object constant? So now we're getting to the object itself. We've looked at lighting, looked at the scene, and now we're looking at the object itself and the color of the object. Let me give you a quote. "The constancy of color is merely an abstract moment of the constancy of things. And the constancy of things is established upon the primordial consciousness of the world as the horizon of all of our experiences. Thus, it is not because I perceive constant colors beneath the variety of lightings that I believe in things, and the thing will not be a sum of constant characteristics. Rather, I discover constant colors to the extent that my perception is in itself open to a world and to things." Okay, so quite a lot there. What can I say? The constancy of color then, and in fact all qualities of an object, isn't the starting point. And if you start at that, you lose the very thing you're trying to get. You get this abstracted quality. Rather, it's built on the constancy of things, of the things in the scene, the things before us in this context. And this, we've already seen, we talked about this way back at the beginning, this is built on that primordial consciousness of the world as a background, as a horizon, as a place in which we are engaged, a place in which we're active and engaged with things around us. So I think what Merleau-Ponty is really getting at there is that I don't see things because I see constant colors. And focusing on that, the constancy of the colors is a bit of a red herring. It leads us away from the colors themselves. Rather, I see those constant colors because I see constancy of the things. And so the constancy of color, which is what we're trying to explain, is built on, it's grounded in this deeper, more holistic understanding we have, or this holistic apprehension, this holistic grasp we have of the world, this primordial consciousness of the world. And now we can go back to that quote from the beginning. Real colour remains beneath the appearances, just as the background continues beneath the figure. That is not as a quality that is seen or conceived, but rather as a non-sensorial presence. Now I think we can see what that means. Real colour isn't light of a particular wavelength, or a particular qualia, a particular quale in our minds, in our consciousnesses. That is to say, real colour isn't what we ordinarily think of colour. That's what we normally think of when we think of colour. A separate quality, something that is kind of stuck on objects, but is not a fundamental part of the object itself. Rather, for Merleau-Ponty, real colour is intertwined in that scene, in the object which is buried in the scene, which is that's not a good word. It's intertwined in the object, with the object which appears in a scene, in a field before us. So it's necessarily ambiguous, and it's also necessarily kind of pushed into the background. It's not a focal point. If we try and grab the color from an object and investigate it, analyze it on its own, we lose it. We have to put it back in the object, and there it serves to reveal or define or shape our grasp of that object. And so that's what that quote was about. It's beneath the appearances, the same way that the background is beneath the figure. It's not a quality that we see or that we conceptualize. It's a non-sensorial presence that is, it's part of the spectacle before us. Okay, so the third perceptual constant is weight. Right, so this section's a short section, and Merleau-Ponty starts by just saying that everything we've just talked about with size and form and with colour applies to all of our sensory experiences, sounds, temperatures, and then he mentions weights. And he focuses on this a little bit, quite a short section. I'll just go through it very briefly. So again, it's a perceptual constant, so the question is, why is our perception of weight the same whether we feel that weight on our hand or on our forehead? So presumably lying on your back with the object placed on your forehead, we perceive the real weight the same as we would feel if it was on our hand. And he says then that this, given that that's the case, it can't be a calculation. It's not something where we're not converting the impression from here. You know, we haven't performed a calculation. We don't. If someone puts an object on my forehead, I don't say, okay, well that feels like this, and I know from past experience that if something feels like that, it's going to be about half that weight in my hand, so it's going to be blah blah blah. You know, there's no calculation, because presumably you've never had an object put on your forehead for you to ascertain the weight. So there's no way you could have performed such a calculation. Yet we still get a sense, we still have this constant sense, this constant perception of a weight which remains the same in both cases. And the reason this happens is because we don't know our body the way an engineer knows a machine that they've made, that they've built. You know, we don't relate to our body in that way. It's not like we've talked about this before. Our bodies aren't what's the word I'm looking for? Our bodies aren't mechanical devices, tools. They're not tools that we use and relate to as relating to a tool which is external to me. The conclusion of this little section is that then we don't calculate weights when they're measured by different body parts. Rather, weight is immediately given in the different impressions as different manifestations of a real weight. So the weight that we sense, that we perceive, is immediately given to us, whether it's been placed on our hand or on our foreheads, as a different manifestation of the weight of the object. And this real weight, the weight of the object, is the property of the object against the background of our body. So that's how we're gauging this. Again, it's not an arbitrary rule. There's no calculation. There's no law involved here. There's no rationalizing or intellectualizing, conceptualizing. It's just everything comes back to our bodies. It's like that optimal distance, that privileged perception. Same thing here. Same thing applies. And so in calling this the real weight of the thing, again, obviously I don't mean the true weight as in there could be a weight which is not true, or you perceive a weight which is false. None of that. All of this is happening prior to true and false. Okay, I think that's basically all there is with weight. The same type of everything applies that we've already talked about. Let's move on to tactile perception, because there's a little bit here. So this one, in touch, it's not that long either, but in touch, the body then is like lighting, in the sense that it reveals the object. And there's a nice quote: just like the exploratory gaze of genuine vision, knowing touch throws us beyond our body through movement. So that's a nice little quote. We get that feeling the body is like lighting, bringing the object before us. There is, of course, passive touch, when parts of our body that we don't normally use to explore the world are being touched or are touching something. For example, your feet on the floor or the chair beneath you. This is an example of passive touch, which is not directly involved in revealing an object for us. Same with passive vision. There's passive vision as well, and that's vision where there's no gaze. Remember that word has a special meaning for Merleau-Ponty. No gaze. Merleau-Ponty's example is under dazzling light. If there's the light's too bright, then your gaze is no longer serving to illuminate the thing. I think maybe even a better example perhaps would be, when you're looking at something but you're daydreaming, you're thinking about something else. You're not really taking in the scene before you. That's kind of an example of passive vision without a gaze. Okay, anyway, back to touch. We've talked about touch being like lighting. The body being like lighting in the touch. He makes specific mention of movement and time here, which you might expect, especially time, because everything is ultimately going to come back to time. But he talks about these two features and says they're not just conditions to tactile phenomena. Rather, they are a component of the tactile phenomena. So they're not just things that we have to have in order to then get the perception of touch. They are part of touch. Let me read a quote. They actualize. So we're talking about, okay, stop. The they that we talk about are movement and time. Okay. They actualize the articulation of tactile phenomena, just as light sketches out the configuration of a visible surface. Smoothness is not a sum of similar pressures, but rather the manner in which a surface makes use of the time of our tactile exploration or modulates the movement of our hand. So maybe a fine distinction, a fine point to make, but I think an important one. Movement and time are, they're not just kind of what touch happens in, or they're not just necessary conditions for touch to occur. They are touch. The smoothness isn't, we can't abstract out from everything that's happening and say it's a sum, a calculation of similar pressure. So same pressure here, same pressure there, same pressure. Okay, let's put it all together and we've got smoothness. That's not what's happening. Rather, it's the way that the surface makes use of my hand, makes use of the time that my hand is there. It's the way that it modulates the movement of my hand. So these aren't these features, movement and time, they're not just accidental features. They're not just a part of, or they're not precursors or necessary conditions. I'm saying that too many times. Necessary conditions, they are a part of touch itself. Touch includes these, and that gets us to the phenomenon. That's what makes the difference between phenomenology and, say, science, where phenomenology takes these things. The sign is the signification. It takes the perceptions themselves, including the movement, including the time. It doesn't abstract out from all of these and try and get a pure quality. And so what Merleau-Ponty says then about this, if we think about it in this way, it's not consciousness that touches. It's not a mental thing. It's the hand that touches. We've said something similar about vision before. It's not consciousness that sees, it's the eye that sees. And so that's quite nice. A couple of things, a couple of smaller points towards the end. This was interesting, actually. Visual experience versus tactile experience. This is just kind of an aside. But visual experience, Merleau-Ponty says, more easily creates the illusion of a constituting consciousness. The illusion that we're this detached observer. And that's because the spectacle appears spread out before us. We are present everywhere and yet situated nowhere. It's like, everything's arranged before us, and we're capable of seeing anything, everything. Nothing's kind of hidden. Nothing's revealed step by step. Everything is just laid bare before us. That's how it seems in vision, in visual experience. And that's why it creates that illusion. But tactile experience, on the other hand, isn't spread out in this way before us. It doesn't produce an explicit object in the same way that vision does. We have to be, and this is kind of interesting, when we touch, the object is revealed bit by bit, step by step, as our hand moves over the object. But in vision, the whole thing, bam, it's just there in one hit. And so that's what creates this illusion, this sense that we're a detached observer. And it's not present in the same, it's not present, that sense isn't present in tactile perception. And Merleau-Ponty says nicely, in tactile experience, I cannot forget my body. My body is a crucial component, I'm using it to touch. And again, we can forget that in vision, lending support or making it easier to believe that we're this constituting consciousness separated from everything around us. So segueing into the body, let me give you a quote. I can only effectively touch if the phenomenon encounters an echo in me, if it is in accord with a certain nature of my consciousness, and if the organ that comes to encounter it is synchronized with it. So again, we're just pulling it back, and this great way that Merleau-Ponty has of thinking about the body, not as a tool, not as an instrument we use to navigate. It's something that resonates with objects, resonates with other objects. The phenomenon encounters an echo in me, in this body. That's just such an awesome way of putting it. I have to synchronize. My body has to be synchronized with the object in order to perceive it, in order to effectively touch it. So body is so central. It's central in everything, but it's more apparently central when it comes to touch. What have I said? Discuss. Centrality of body and being attuned to things, or being able to respond to their solicitations. Another nice way of thinking about it. I think I've already said that. Okay, that is this first section. Let's have a quick look at the summary. So perceptual constants first. That was what we that's this whole section, perceptual constants. And the way that Merleau-Ponty talks about this is our hold on things, the way that we grasp things. And we looked first at size and form, and we had that important idea of the privileged perception, which is that optimal distance by which our hold on the thing achieves the most clarity possible. And that will vary depending, like I said, depending on what we're engaged in. Then we looked at colour and the importance of lighting which always functions as revealing an object. So the lighting must fade into the background. Colour is always the colour of an object in a scene. So colour is always a coloured object, and it's always a coloured object in a field, in a scene before us. And the real colour of the object is beneath the appearances. So remember, that was that idea that the colour is like, it's what makes the object appear the way that it does. It's an essential part of the object, not just an accidental quality, not just something that the object has, which it could have something, and it could have a different color. That's if it had a different color, it would be a different object. That's the point with this. Real color is the object. It's contained in the object, and it's beneath the appearances. It's not something we see. If we see the color, then we're not seeing the object. We've abstracted the color from the scene. So the color is kind of like the background to the object itself. And that's back to that primordial consciousness, the way that the world appears before us, and the grasp that we have over the world as a whole and things in it. Then we looked at weight. And we talked about this being the measure of the object against the background of my body. That was a nice way to put it. And finally, we looked at touch. And touch was like lighting, the way that our bodies operate like lighting in revealing an object. We focused on movement and time as being central aspects of touch, not just necessary preconditions. And finally, we looked at the role of the body in this, which is apparent more so in touch than in any of our other sensory perceptions, and the way that our body has to be attuned to things. Just a great way of thinking about the body that is present all through phenomenology of perception. Okay. So that's this section. Nothing special to say here. Thanks for listening again, and see you in the next video.